Okay, now take it away, Apple. Thank you.
Okay. No, as I said, most of you know me as an FC. I do that a lot, and I love doing that. But I also got a few years in the habit of getting space jobs because people know you, and then you get to do things. And one of those space jobs is being a recon. Another of those space jobs is being the SIG leader of Insurgent Squad. Insurgent Squad is like I will post the link here for the recruitment thread we have on. Insurgent Squad is a pretty unique organization, or unique. It's a quite different organization than a lot of others. What we do is we AWOX in Horde. That's basically what we do. And AWOXing is a term of using a blue character to kill another blue character. And you can use that character itself to kill it, but you can also use that character to light a Cyno, or tackle something to kill the stuff we do. One thing what is really a thing with Insurgent Squad, and let's go about a few requirements first. I think the biggest requirement of being a person who will be able to do great things in Insurgent Squad is a person who is a self-starter. We have an organization, and I'm the SIG leader, but I'm not going to hold you by your hand and tell you what to do or when to do it or etc. No, we have our communication channels, and when you're therein, you will have contact with FCs from other organizations. We work a lot with Black Ops, with Sungun and other people in Black Ops. We work with SV. We work with other organizations. We work with mainline FCs who like to dive into wormholes and work together to find targets and kill them. And I'm not going to. I'm there. My main role there is being on the administration side of it, to make sure all the stuff that's needed to make sure you can do your work in Insurgent Squad is there. I sometimes maybe do like a treasure roam, that we form a lot of treasures and just go roam into Horde until we get blacklisted out of Horde and put on the red list and get killed and had fun enough. We sometimes do that, but not that much. Most of the time we have people that are there that have their own bomber alt, that have their own Vexor alt, that have other kinds of alts, zooming around space, finding targets, working together with our friends, and kill those targets. So that's just an amazing thing. Talk about Horde reapplying a week later. That's not a thing anymore. Horde has come a bit better than that, but not that much. Why can, and I think that's also one of the reasons why Insurgent Squad can exist. A lot of people think that Karma Fleet is one of the easiest corporations to get into. It's actually one of the hardest within Goonswarm. It has one of the best recruitment teams there is. A lot of people think, yeah, I have my Karma Fleet alt, but a lot of time people are in other corps than Karma Fleet when bad things happen. But Horde is completely different. If you want to apply to Horde, you just make a character, click apply, and mostly within a day you're accepted and you have a character in Horde. And that's just amazing. Because who doesn't want to have a character in Horde and annoy them to hell? Now, if you can see in the topic I linked, you have some results or actions, some dead supers, many capitals, all those kind of things. I will link a few more later. So that's a lot of great kills that we have there. And that's just the fun you get to do. Now, what do we require for you if you want to join us? In general, we want you to be 6 months in the Imperium. And why 6 months? Why not shorter? With being in Horde, you make the job of Caitlyn hard. Because we have in general the rule that you cannot have any characters in a hostile alliance. And when you're in Insurgent Squad, you are allowed to have characters in Horde, maybe some other organizations, but you at least for sure in Horde. And then you will get a red flag. So we want to make sure that if you are going to join that organization, you have been at least in Goons and are not a complete idiot doing that. Also, Insurgent Squad is not the squad for every skirmish FC to get their own horde alt so they can get their own horde intel. That's not how Insurgent Squad works. If that's what you plan to using it for, then you will be thrown out of the airlock very fast and goodbye. That's not what we do. So what we do is really working for the Alliance to annoy Horde as much as possible. And we have our wavelengths when we're doing that. In general, we do it a lot to use kill Horde capitals. But if we are at war with Horde, things we do also, for example, is what you saw during the X47 fight, is joining their comms as just making a shit amount of noise and annoying them to hell that way. And even if you get kicked off, then you just make another character and join the comms with it again. So what was happening there in X47 is that, and you can hear Killerby yelling about people needing to stay quiet. People were chirping, making strange noises and all those kind of things. That were people from Insurgent Squad doing that. So that's just those kind of things what we do. We also do other things. I'm not going to explain everything we do because I don't want to make Horde too wise and all the good plans we still have to make their life miserable. So you will find that out when it is. But yeah, the main reason to do this is just make Horde's life as miserable as possible. And the end goal of this is that Horde will also be an ABI gated corp. If that ever happens, I think that's the greatest day, and that's the day that we should stop with doing Insurgent Squad, and then we have our goal reached. So I hope that ever will happen, and we will see what's happening there. So that's just a quick overview of what we're going to do. I'm going to link a few kills we had in the last few weeks, and if you have some questions, just start talking, and I will look in a moment and see if we have some things to answer, and maybe I'll ramble some more.
Well, you guys type questions while Apple's gonna do that. I will tell you a story from not the last Northern War, but the one before that. The piece that we were talking about was the Roar campaign. And one of the things that we did was, this was an Insurgent Squad guy who did this. He joined the Horde fleet, the response fleet, and we were out with bombers. I'm pretty sure Apple was on that fleet with us. We were out with bombers, and he got onto their comms and said, "Help, I'm tackled, the goons have me," or he said Goonies, whatever. And they warped the response fleet into our waiting bombers, and we just bombed the fuck out of them. As they landed, our bombs detonated. We took out the entire response fleet in their staging system like 3 times, and they never caught on to the fact that the guy that they were warping to save was leading them into an ambush every single time. Because, of course, we killed his ship, too. He just got another ship and pretended to be an idiot and got caught again. We camped their staging system, preventing them from ratting for, I don't know, like 6 hours or something like that. Honestly, until we got bored. Asher was running that fleet. And we got bored and left. And it wasn't Kunmi, it was, I just spaced his name. It was Zungan, I think. It may have been Big Bill. I actually had alts all around there just waiting. And he caught like a freighter. So on our way home, we hit a freighter after doing it. It was just, that all started with an insurgent guy claiming that he had been tackled. And we bombed the hell out of their response fleet. We actually ran out of ammunition, believe it or not.
Oh yeah, that sometimes happens.
So that's an insurgent thing. Apple put some kills in there. If you guys got questions for it, please do just ask a lot. Yeah, bombs are pretty big. We're using stealth bombers. You can only carry a handful of them.
You can only use like what, 7? You can only use like 7 bombs before they start killing each other with their own damage.
That is a thing. And when you're dealing with a fleet like this, you do a little bit of a sequence on it. So you kind of fire them all at different positions and all those kinds of things. And everybody does launch them a little bit later. Itor's right. You can bring a Blops fuel truck with you. I usually use a Viador when I do it, but you can use any of the blockade runners, and you can take a Blops bridge with them.
Yep.
Most of our bombers carry 4 bombs, right? 2 in the launcher, 2 in the bay, because they've also got torpedoes. If you win all bombs, I think it's 6 with a T1 launcher.
Venture landed on the gate.
Yeah, and the reason why you do 2 and 2 is a lot of the bombers we use there is we use 2 Void and 2 Focus Void and 2 EM or whatever type we use. And if you normally you can have 2 in the launcher and 3 in the bay and then have some drops. But you cannot switch out between the bomb types if you have 3 in the bay. So because you don't have enough room. So that's why you have 2 on 2.
Guys, we may have a target, so heads up. There he is.
Nice.
Fuck, he's down. All right, pot him.
We have an auto kill.
Damn, that was quick.
Yeah, nice. Okay, yeah. Good. You put it in local. Excellent. Because, fuck, what do we care?
I didn't even get on the kill. No, I'm sad.
Yeah, me either. You insta-locking bastards.
About to dock up this dummy and grab something quicker.
But yeah, that's.
Sino guy, for you guys who are not in, I'll put it in fleet here. This is somebody who is going to do some bad things.
Not anymore. But yeah, that's the most fun things. We do a lot of fun things with this, and as I said, one times we're more active than other times. What do you need to have to get here? You need 1 Omega slot. So you don't need an Omega character of account for only 1 slot on one of your other characters to get yourself a Covop trained in Horde. Because one of the most important things we want you to do, be able to light covert sinos with an Horde character. And for the rest, we need to be willing to make a lot of accounts for that, and that are alphas, because this is greatest to use for alphas. So even if you're just like a newbie and you're here, alpha accounts are amazing for this. What we're also doing, we're doing reimbursement. So if you lose a cruiser, a battle cruiser, and a battleship, you get an X amount of money. And also, if you use your alpha account, your alpha account get kicked out of that, we give you a new alpha skill injector. Those things give you like 50,000 skill points, and with those 50,000 skill points, you are trained up again to do the next Insurgent Squad job with. So pretty much, you don't, or you need 2-3 days of training, but most of the time we just give you a new skill injector, alpha for 50,000 skill points, and you're on your way. And the greatest things what are there, if we have those like skilling spree things, then we get all those free skill points. So then you make a lot of characters and you give all your characters some skill points. And you have a lot of characters ready to go for Horde. Few important things so you don't make our friends angry in the Blackhand and our friends angry in counterintelligence. As I said before, this is not your special snowflake intel alt. That's not what we're for. That's what we're doing, and we'll kick you to the corp so fast if we find out that's the reason you want to join us. Like, there are other ways to get that intel, and if you're a skirmish commander and you need that intel to run your fleets, then you're doing something wrong, in my opinion. That's point 1. Point 2 is that you're also not an intel guy. So, as I said before, you have the ability to do intel. But when you're in this corp, for that reason, we have Blackhand. That is the person who do the intel gathering, and there's many reasons why we don't want. Oh, that sounds interesting.
All right, guys, heads up. We may get another target.
I will keep talking until it arrives. And that's the one most important thing, is that you do this purely to annoy Horde as much as we can. and have a lot of fun with that. So that's what I want to end with. So if you have questions about Insurgent Squads, or even if you have questions about FCing, because I can answer questions about that also, and more than willing to do that, feel free to put them in there or ask them on comms, and I will answer them as best as I can.
Well, I maybe have a suggestion that you could go into it a little. You mentioned FCing. We had a couple of beginners talking about the lack of fleets, in quotations. Would you mind to explain to the beginners why they can easily fix it themselves, even though they're just barely into the game?
What they could do: join skirmish commanders and run their own fleets. And I'm not joking this. People, you can make your own fleets in FC from the start. And if you want to start a bit slow, then you these are the greatest times. Like, you don't want a big fleet, just pick for a filament fleet and say you have 25 people. Oh.
Yep, he's in local.
Going to kill a
Everybody get
Kikamora.
ready. Burn at him as soon as he decloaks. Yeah, stand by here for a second, guys. He's waiting to see if he can get back through webs, everything. As soon as you can get him on him, he may try and crash that gate. If you've got drones, get your drones out.
If you
There he
do
is.
bubbles
He's
like
burning.
this, if you do bubbles like this, make sure you bubble more around the gate. By the way, he's already dead before I could lock him up. Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Cool. Okay. Now we have time to talk more. So about seeing start your own fleets. Just start doing it with like Cormorants, Talwars, Thrashers, whoever cares. And if you lose your ships, nobody cares, and just set in the ping. I'm in UFC, want to try out, etc., etc., and do your thing. Second point: if you think you have not enough fleets, join groups like Valp Squad, like S3, like Liberty Squad, like the squad that doesn't exist. There are many, like the new wormhole group that's there that has an auto invite that you can do in wormholes. There's so many groups you can join. If you don't think you have enough things to do, and you really don't want to FC yourself, join one of those groups and have fun there. That are my things. GS frigates, you have free ships in GS frigates, always great. FC, what do I think about interdictors and dictors? Dictor pilots is a very skill. Ranger, do you do how to dictor pilot class?
No, we don't. We debated it, but we don't have one right now.
Okay, no, I think you should have, because this is a very big group. So what I want interdictor pilots to do, and dictor pilots need to, if they know what they're doing in my fleets, and people who are in a dictor pilot and know themselves what they're doing, they just do their own thing. I don't care what you do your own thing. If you're a new dictor pilot, just wait for me to tell you to bubble things and do that. Things that are dictor pilots are great to do is where I use them for. If you are in certain fleets and you want enemy fleets not to warp to you, you tell dictor pilots to approach the enemy fleet and put a dictor bubble up like 40-50 kilometers away from you, so they cannot warp to you at 0. That's a very important job for a dictor pilot. Is of course dictor pilots. If you are in a dictor and we are fighting on a grid, like a big grid with caps, citadels there, etc. If you're in a dictor, like get away 500 kilometers away from me in your dictor and cloak up of the grid. And when there is a need for things to bubble, then you just decloak and warp to where the wrecks are from the people that need to be bubbled, and bubble them. Because and you stay safe during that, because the first thing enemy does is kill all enemy dictors. So if you're cloaked away 500 kilometers away and they think they're done, you decloak and you warp to them just before they warp off and catch half the fleet, then we can kill more people. So that's also something great. other things where I use dictors for. Before, if we need to run, sometimes the enemies are bigger than us and we need to run away, or we want to go somewhere and we don't want to get caught. Things I do is tell people, dictors to bubble the gate we come from. So when people land on it, they need to go to a bubble and do that on both sides. Or things you do is, for example, tell a dictor to warp at 100 kilometer to the outgate we're going. And when we warp to the outgate, I tell the dictor to bubble up. And the enemy tries to catch up, warps behind us, and they are getting caught 100 kilometers from the gate. Takes them more time to catch up with us. Other things that dictors are good at, we work with, we see it a bit more, but bombers, for example, and this is more a Hictor job for heavy interdictors, is one thing, if you want to get on a grid where bombers are, the thing you do is warp an Hictor ahead of you to where you want to land with your group. You tell the Hictor to be ready, and when the Hictor is in warp, like 10 seconds after that, you warp the whole fleet. When the Hictor lands, he puts up his bubble, and if the bombers want to catch you, then they have to warp to the Hictor, and because that bubble is up, they get caught in the bubble. The bombs not always hit the whole fleet, and you can kill them because they're caught in the bubble. So those are kind of things. And one thing dictors need to do, if bombers show up, if you ever see bombers decloaked and starting to bomb you and you are in a dictor, you put your MWD on and burn to the bombers and put bubbles up towards them. Bubble that bomber fleet to hell, not your own fleet, make sure you don't bubble your own fleet, but bubble those bombers, because if bombers get killed, the bombs don't go off. So that's really the things that dictor pilots, and if you know what you're doing, dictor pilots are amazing. And sometimes you mess up, and then you mess up, and then the FC yells at you and maybe kills you, and that's the thing.
I want to expand on one thing that Apple said really quickly there. If you guys are not familiar with the way that bombs work off of stealth bombers, if the stealth bomber dies before that bomb detonates, it doesn't do any damage. So that's what he's talking about there. That's the whole point to that. If you kill the bomber first, that bomb won't do any damage.
Oh yeah, and for reimbursement, because you're going to die a lot, the rules are for a dictor are, for the fit, is you have to have a dictor bubble launcher, a cloak, and an MWD. And for the rest, Atrium doesn't care how your dictor is fit, as long as you have fit all slots. He doesn't care whatever you do, what works the best for you.
Don't be an Eris, yeah, that's true. Sabers for life, man. Do we still have our
Sabers
Eris pilot? That was fun.
But sabers are good, but I also love flycatchers are fun. And what is the other one? The Heretic, is it? I think, or something like that. That's great for armor fleets, because those can catch reps in armor fleets. So that's pretty awesome to have.
We had an Eris on the fleet earlier. Apple, it looks like he's gone home already, but we did have one earlier.
Okay. So yeah,
that was
that's
fun.
yeah. Did I miss any? Do you have any other questions, people, about Insurgent Squad or things, etc., or just FCing? Oh yeah, and just start FCing. Like FCing is a bit like Insurgent Squad. We need a bit of the same type, and that's probably why it fits me also pretty well. You need to be a self-starter as an FC. Yeah, you get sometimes pings for our cohorts to tell you to FC, but a lot of time is if you want to really grow as an FC and you want to have the fun fleets and you want to do that, you have to put work in it and have to find your own targets and find that way to do your targets. So if you start FCing, don't wait until you get a ping from, hey, does anyone want to do a fleet? No, just find your own fun. And like with those filaments we have now until the 13th of January, it's amazing. Like, it's 25 people in a fleet, you can go all over the map and shoot things. That's amazing. Drifter holes, I assume Cathy has talked about that during his talk. I don't know if that happened. But drifter holes are amazing for like roaming around and stuff. We have an extensive jump gate network up to the north and those kind of things. Use that. Like, there's so many ways to do that. The one thing that I have, and that's just how it fits with me, I don't like roaming. I don't like peacetime fleets. I only do straight ups. That's just how I need to have a goal for my fleet, and if it doesn't have a goal, I don't really care about it. And for me, a goal for the fleet is not to roam around and find targets. Like, that's not my thing. That doesn't work for me. I don't like that. So I just do straight ups, and I have a lot of fun with that. But a lot of people like doing the other type of fleets, and like to roam around. So everybody gets to do whatever he wants to do or she wants to do, and have fun.
Apple, we got a question here for Insurgent Squad and Fleet. There is basically, is that a thing where you can go in and fuck with the enemy markets, buying shit up and all those kinds of things?
You can do that, but that's we expect you to also to do the other thing. We expect you to light a signer for an enemy fleet. We expect you to tackle something, etc. That's what is mainly what is there. If you just want to market fuck, etc. with them, then that's not Insurgent Squad is not the place to be for that. If you just want to do that, if you might make that part of your group, then I that's okay. But you have to do the other stuff also.
Okay, so basically, you have to meet the bare minimum of what Insurgent Squad does, and then outside of that, you can do other things like market, right?
Yes.
There are niche times where we will ask for that, like on the eve of like a keep star fight or something. We'll have you like buy out bubbles and some other essential items that maybe the fleet will use tomorrow for the fight. But that kind of activity is not really like part of like the Insurgent Squad mission statement. You know what I mean?
Not standard, but sometimes that happens indeed, what he says. But we want you. The main thing what we do is fuck with and kill our enemy and make their life miserable as much as possible. And it's not like some people want to use it like to import stuff and like sell stuff there at a high price and then buy stuff up and be like market fuckeries and also make ISK that way. Like that's like fun and games, but that's not what Insurgent Squad is for. And then you get me yelling at you when I hear Caitlin talking to me from, hey, I see those idiots doing that, and she will tell me what you do, and then I will yell at you and tell you to stop doing that. So if you just do that and like try to make it that way, there are other ways to do that. That's not what Insurgent Squad are for.
He does have to deal with me a lot because if CI notices that you're doing stuff that doesn't really fit with IS, then they start to wonder whether IS is just a cover for you doing, you actually playing a hostile alt. So being an IS doesn't give you reign to have, characters that you actually play. That makes me want to start banning people.
Any last questions for Apple? We're going to switch over here to our Blackhand representative. So any last things for Apple really quick? Apple, thank you for coming out. So he's doing the Insurgent Squad. Zerk just linked the hostile alt policy. If you guys are interested at all in doing Insurgent Squad, getting involved in the Blackhand, for the love of God, you need to read that hostile alt policy first, or Caitlin's going to come for your scalp, and the rest of us are just going to sit back and watch and probably laugh.
And sorry, I'm going to stay here because Zerk got me like a month ago and made me a Blackhand handler. So the thing like you get more and more space jobs is also happening for me. So I can help you out with that a bit also. But Zerk has much more to tell about that. So I think he should have fun with that.
All right, Zerk. So please take it away. Tell us about the Blackhand and all of the crazy shit you guys do.
All right, hello, I am Zerk. I am the director of Blackhand. So the Insurgent Squad is the people who go out and do sabotage stuff, right? And a lot of what they do is a very overt, meaning that your character's gonna get caught probably, and you're gonna have to make a new one. Whereas the Blackhand is more focused on getting into the enemy alliance and staying there and doing like the long game, where you are you're maybe doing space jobs, or maybe you're becoming a long-standing member. Doing like line member work, or you're not trying to get caught is the point. So we want somebody to go somewhere and stay there and be able to provide intel for a long period of time. Blackhand agents are very essential in strategic fights because you're able to provide enemy intentions. Intent is the hardest thing to prove. So when we know what the enemy is planning to do, whether it's a secret op or some type of surprise attack, to knowing if they're going to warp off grid, if they're planning to warp off grid, or who they're targeting in the middle of a fight, the Blackhand agents are the ones who are relaying that information to our military sector or our military organization, and that gives them enough notice to be able to react in time so that their attack is not as effective. We take anybody. If you are a day one Goon member, we see value in all hands, provided that you're able to meet our activity requirements. So sometimes we will purge people who are just inactive or just not meeting the basic requirements. But things that you can expect when you join is...
Zerk, sorry, just a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Guys in the fleet, can you guys hear him? Ziggy's saying he might be muted. Are you guys able to hear him okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, we hear.
Okay, never mind then. Please go ahead.
You can hear me, right? Okay.
Yep,
All right.
I can hear you. Sorry.
All right. So when you join the Blackhand, you'll be assigned a specific handler. We call them your handler. They're basically going to be your mentor. They're going to be the person who trains you, and they're going to teach you how to be a spy, and they're going to help you get into a place, and they're going to teach you all the best practices that we have done trial and error on. And you're going to develop a close relationship with your handler. So it's not like you just want to join and then we're just like, yeah, go ahead and just join somewhere and get back to us. This is like it's a relationship so you're going to have guidance and you're going to have mentorship. So it's kind of lonely being a spy when you're like the only guy in the hostile alliance. So having somebody back home to talk to and that can steer you in the right direction is really helpful. Like I've already discussed some examples of what you would be doing. Some people just like to go over there or over to a hostile alliance, and they just like to be the passive guy who just provides some intel, and they don't really want to do PvP when you have other guys who love to do PvP, and maybe they're enemy FCs, and we can get some pre-arranged fights going on where we know that our guy is going to be the FC, so we can work around that. And then maybe you'll have another guy who wants to go super hardcore into it, and he wants to take like some type of space job in the enemy alliance, and he can start steering that alliance towards disaster or some type of failscape based on his space job. So effort level and time investment for the agent ranges vastly based on your availability and how much effort you want to put into it, and however much effort you're putting into your work as an agent, you can expect that return from your handler is a good way to look at it. One thing that hooked me into the Blackhand when I was new, I just joined Goons. You know, I have a pretty high PvP background from days of low sec, so I figured when I got here I could just join Reavers, and yeah, I'm gonna join Reavers because they're like the PvP guys, and they're like, nah, fuck you, go, you know, come back when you have a few months in Goons. And Blackhand was the only people who took me in, so it's forever loyal for that. So that's like a key principle for me, is to take people who want to join. And then on top of that, what actually got me to stay was being able to see how frustrated your enemy FCs get when they're doing everything they can to alpha our targets, and they have no idea that there's a comm spy and the guy who's actually in this fleet just relaying targets on the fly. So our Logi's locking up, you know, the target when their DPS is locking the target, and we've already got, you know, Logi going, and they just can't break anybody. And that frustration and that feeling of sabotage is really what hooked me into the Blackhand.
So I would like to point out that I'm probably the one that rejected you, and I don't feel bad about that.
Nah, and then, you know, I found out later on the reasons why and all that, and I understand, so it's cool.
I just thought I'd throw that out there. So we can get Zerg a chance to actually breathe. Does anybody have any questions for him for right now? That's not so much a question, but it is a statement in Fleet. But I think it's a great one, and I hope you all have taken this to heart from all of the directors that you've heard speaking so far tonight. Is you get out of it what you put in. If you guys put in the effort to do something, you will get out of it, you know, all of these kinds of rewards. It's so much fun to sit and do these kinds of pieces, being out on the fleets, having, as a Logi pilot myself, having our Blackhand guys call on comms saying, okay, Ultra Cow, you're the next target, or Fuyin, you're the next target, or Apple Pear is next. It's amazing how much that actually helps us to keep you all alive. It's really quite integral. If you guys have been on main fleet, I'm sure you have heard this come through. So that is a thing. Zarek has typed a few things in there for you guys. Let's keep on that. Kalane, thanks for coming out, man. Have a good night. If you don't want to burn all the way back to 1DQ, that one jump's getting you. Just pick a Citadel here, dude. Do we have any questions for Zarek? I've got just a couple here. Zarek, you got a question there? I'm going to read it for people because we are doing just an audio recording. It says, what are the most common ways spies get caught? From the counterintelligence of their side, and also if you could touch on that from the counterintelligence from our side, if you're involved in that. I don't know if you are. And then the second question is always story time. What kind of fun things have you guys done to the enemy besides those that you've already talked about?
All right. So anything counterintelligence I can't talk to about. Not in this forum, anyways. But spies do get caught. Sometimes they're dumb. Sometimes they join the wrong comms or something, and I'm already getting yelled at by Caitlin. The biggest thing in for new spies is acting like a goon. Basically, is you get the guy who he has 100 million SP on like 4 different characters, and he's day one in Horde talking about how his Rorqual can mine however much, and he's supposed to not know anything. Or he's calling somebody a puppy fuck in test chat, and they're like, puppies, right? Who says puppies besides goons? Nobody. So it's like red flag there. Other than that, though, being a little too overt or being too picky about or too intrusive, asking about things that maybe a new guy shouldn't be asking about, only joining ops where there's a goon enemy fleet, maybe not being like a regular member in the alliance. You only log in for that time where intel is required. So there are some patterns out there that you can do as a spy to not get
Heads up, guys,
caught.
we may have a target coming in. I didn't see a gate flash on our side. He may be coming in from 1DQ, but just keep your eyes out. We may get another kill tonight.
Not 1DW.
All right, so he could be coming in from 1DQ. Then everybody, just go ahead about your stuff. So Zarek, please continue. We just may shoot somebody here.
So the only story I'm gonna tell, I know Caitlin has one or two, but we were part of the I think it was the X47 Keepstar fight where we started. I think it was the first one. I can't remember because we've been in so many fights. But it was the Keepstar battle where it was the first one that we won in that GOTG war, and we finally were able to start saving our own Titans, and they were just eating shit after that. That was Blackhand that was giving away the Titan pilots and letting you know who was getting DD'd next, so we could save them, and then we were killing in return. And then that eventually prompted Kill to be on the next one, just to say, dog up all the faction Titans and all that. So that's one of our biggest moments was there.
So there's another question here in Fleet 4. It says, how do you handle the thing of making friends and then destroying them?
You gotta be kind of a cruel person, I mean, it's kind of sociopathical because you are making real ties, but you just gotta remember that you're loyal to the home base and your tribe is above everything else. I've been in that situation too, where it's just like fuck you, and now we have to kill you, and it was worth it. So I don't know. The biggest thing though is if you have any questions about that, some people might have second thoughts. Maybe Goons is your first home in Eve. When you join the Blackhand and you get to see how shitty the other sides are, you are so thankful that you're on our team. Yeah, dock up your faction Titans.
Now, on one story I can tell you about the same thing that I was myself involved with is that at one point some hostile dude contacted me because I was an FC. He knew me. I worked with Hyperfiber on that as being in the. Is that he said, "Yeah, I'm an director in a corp in I think it was Slice or whatever, some alliance there." And I'm also in the holding corp, and I'm pretty fed up with them, so I want to go out. And that dude, what he did was, he transferred some citadels to us from his own corp, and next to that, I think at least 10, 15 citadels he removed all the fitting from, changed the timer that the citadels came out, so they didn't came out at 6 in the morning, but just came out during Euro time zone. He emptied all the fuel base. He removed the cloning facilities, so people lost their clones. He put down some jump gates and offline tows, and just ruined their whole infrastructure. And that was not really an agent from us as goons, but it was just somebody from the enemy who ran over, and we worked with Blackhand. And me as a contact, but before I was in the real Blackhand like I'm now, as a contact together with the Blackhand to just run havoc in that organization. And those kind of things don't happen a lot, but when there is a war and there's a lot of pressure, then those things happen, and you have to work with people and talk with them, get a relationship with them, that they trust you, and then use them to hurt your enemy.
I have a couple stories as well. I know I just had my half an hour or a bit ago, but you can't stop me from talking once I start, so I'm back. But during the GOTG war, the Northern War, that was probably one of the highlights of my experience in the Blackhand, because we were very organized. At all of our agents, of course, their identities are protected. They're separated from each other, so they don't know what's going on. But even though you don't necessarily know the big picture, and the big picture doesn't know your individual details for your own safety, your handler is your connection to make sure that they relay that information, so they what impact that you're having. And it's very common where I'll be working with an agent, and they'll relay me real-time info while we're set up ops on both sides, and the agent's like, I've got this very important information, we need to have it handled right away. And we've got our direct hands in with the military and coordinate everybody, where if we need to let somebody know that something's imminent is happening, we can. And so it's not uncommon where we'll just someone that's doing just a normal line member thing, not necessarily being super active, but they'll have information. We can get it to the right people and get it actioned immediately, so that you'll have someone who thinks that they're being sneaky, and next thing you know, dreads start landing on that person out in the middle of nowhere, and they have no idea how that happened. And we can in the midst of while it's still happening, we can get those dreads out there where they need to be, and at the same time we can tell the agent that you put those dreads there. It's like the Cord might not know your name, the FC might not know your name, they might not even know the circumstances of how they ended up getting this information, but you're the person who actually killed that Titan. Like if you didn't speak up at that moment, that Titan or those Titans would still be there. They'd still be doing stupid stuff as stupid Titans do. And it's like that with with bombers, with anything like that. It's like your information, you'd be surprised how quickly you can go from someone saying something's like, I don't know if this matters, but I know that this is planning to happen. And then when that happens, because we know about it ahead of time, we knew where, like, recon could tell us where something's moving, but to know ahead of time what the exact plans are for all of that, as well as Yeah, exactly. As to know the exact intent as well as laid on the our other branches, recon and scouts and everyone else that's out there telling us what's going on and things like that. We can lay that specific information that verifies and validates everybody else's information and then confirms exactly what's going on. So everybody's on the same page, seeing the same information point in the same direction, and you can be where the enemy is moving before they are, and that can be any little short time agent, and it's surprising how much people take for granted the information that they have. You just need to be able to you just need to be trained to spot it, and you need to be willing to speak up, to say that you have it, and you need to be able to say it to people that have the ability to action that information. I am a bit of a wormholer, and my favorite story by far is so last year. Like I know we're doing a wormhole thing now, but we did a wormhole thing previously with Pathfinders and KF1, which is a Karma Fleets group, and there was a lot of time where not much was going on, but we were working Blackhand stuff at that same time where we were getting scouts seeded into locations because we knew about fights ahead of time. Often with wormhole fights, people have to plan stuff out because people have to seed their assets into the hole. People have to prepare a staging pass and all kinds of other stuff. So there's a little bit of a telegraph that a fight is going to happen or has happened. And so one big thing where I enjoyed it is we were able to, for a fight that was a former GOTG corporation, we were able to find out when they were being evicted, and we were able to, the Pathfinders were able to rage roll for a close area, and we knew the wormhole chain from our agents, so we were able to get people in there, and in the middle of their eviction, a 200 confessor goon fleet shows up from their C5 from deep in wormhole space, not even like a nullsec connection, but deep in wormhole space. Goons just come 5 jumps down their chain and come into their wormhole and just start decimating everything and scaring everybody off. And I had access to hear what the FCs on the other sides were saying, and they're like, where do these people come from? How do goons find their way through 5 jumps of wormhole space to our hole? How do these people get here? Like, this is not possible. What's going on? And that's the kind of thing that my agent was jumping for joy when they heard this stuff going on. It's because you can make the weirdest things happen that are just amazing at the time, because you knew that I actually had an impact. Like, this fleet got decimated by bombers because I was able to tell the person to have the bombers in place before the fleet got there, or this Titan is dead because I knew that it was going to be moving to bridge a fleet, and we were able to get dreads there ahead of time. So that knowledge ahead of time, combined with all of our other sources of information, the great people at Scouts and the great people at Recon and our other organizations, Core and stuff, are able to come together and make just great things happen on short notice. And Blackhand is an integral part with all these other organizations and the individual agent, such as everybody listening here that has the information that might characterize some of the other stuff that some of the other organizations are questioning of why they're seeing it. You might be the person that has that information. You're seeing it because somebody mentioned that an FC in Discord offhandedly mentioned that something big might happen in this area, and you add that the light on it that everyone else goes, aha, that makes sense, and it's the greatest feeling is when something like that comes together.
Exceptional stories like that are rewarded exceptionally as well. So if you're a high effort agent and you get yourself into some type of strategic position where the alliance really does need you, we do offer some type of reward systems that we don't talk about publicly. Everybody who runs a PvP fleet for us will get a PAP because you're sacrificing the path that you would have had, and I'll let you double dip on paths. So if you want to run your main and your agent at the same time, I'm still going to give you one on your agent, because we feel that that's the right thing to do for people and kind of incentivize it. I will say that there is a reward that I'll flex your account if you do get into a high area, into some type of alliance, or into a position where we do need you in your high effort, like space jobs or FCs, or there's some other examples. So it's not all the burden's not on you. We do help you as needed.
I have a question.
Actually.
Go for it.
Then go first, Kyle.
Oh, okay. Do you guys have any stories of failure cascading alliances by Blackhand agents, like you said before, about people getting into important space jobs and then sabotaging internally? Or are you not allowed to talk about that?
I would say that the GOTG war is probably a pretty good example of that. Darkness didn't, but if people realize how many alliances were part of GOTG when they started, and then they look at it, there's a combination between the military had a strategy of applying a lot of pressure at the same time. But the Black Hand had a thing going on where we needed to make sure that everywhere somebody went for any kind of stress relief, or to get away from this constant pressure that the military had, we understood what those outlets were and how people got away from it and stuff like that, and the military was able to continually apply pressure. We by having assets in the right places for different wars and stuff like that, you can make sure that everything that's going on, and there's really very few secrets kept. And so a campaign of just just pressure nonstop, eventually they stopped logging in, or alliances decided that they didn't want to be part of that coalition anymore, because as soon as they dropped out of the coalition, the pressure went away. And so once people learned that by dropping out of the coalition, the pressure went away, a lot of people started dropping out of the GOT coalition, for instance. And that's why they triggered the rename to Dead Co's, because so many people were dropping out of it that they honestly
Saber, guys. Get
Saber.
that
were
saber.
dead.
He's trying to crash.
It's like a house of cards. All you gotta do is just nick out the right one, and then they all follow suit.
Yeah. So during that same war, we had a high-level FC that was in CO2. And we put him into position, and through his own merits, he was able to get pretty high into their military command structure. And then once he got there, he was able to do things like be late to timers, or maybe whelp something spectacularly. And what that ended up doing overall is it made it so that their line members did not want to log in for anybody unless it was GigX himself. So it kind of invalidated all the other FCs, even if they're good FCs, because this guy, right? I don't want to say he's the Asher, but he's up there, in CO2. He's not GigX certainly, but he basically invalidated all the other credibilities of the FC. If you're not GigX, then we're not logging in for you, and so that's kind of like a morale thing too. And then that eventually led to the whole narrative where, if GigX isn't leading the fleet, then CO2 can't produce numbers, and if they can't produce numbers, then they start to fail skate, right? Because they're not able to meet their strategic goals and all that, and that just goes more and more into the morale game. It's kind of the meta game, where you're working on the line members, and, where they're not logging in as much, and so that's letting us win in game.
That's really interesting. Can I tell a story that riffs off that very quickly?
Sure, go ahead.
Back before the CO2 war, some of you may remember that both Kaish and Jagan were both trying to run Munin fleets in their SIGs. And they both had Munin doctrines with completely different fits, because neither of them were talking to each other. And both of them were looking for a T2 producer, and I'm one of the alliance's T2 producers. So I built a lot of Munins for them. And then predictably, they never fucking took the fleets out, and like couldn't agree on a fit, and then the war all kicked off. So we were no longer like they were like, oh well, like our squads are like going into mothballs while we go and fight this war. So I've got a little over 500 Munin hulls on my hands that I can't use in Delve at all. And then CO2 announced that they're adopting Munins as a doctrine. So I piped up on GSISC and was like, Arith, am I all right to export these to Jita with this war going on? Like, because I've got these Munin hulls just gathering dust. And he's like, yeah, sure, just try and jack the prices up some. Okay. So 3 entire jump freighter loads of Munins to Jita, which is an awful lot of ISK if you don't know.
It's like 120 bill worth of Munins.
Yeah. Well, here comes the story. So I get there, and I get there on the day, and they arrive, and there's a fleet pinged out, and we go out. Now, in that war, we were using a complete trash doctrine. I think we were using it was a battle cruiser doctrine of some kind. We could whelp an entire fleet, and providing we killed like 4-5 Munins, we were risk positive. Not a problem.
So it was Ferox's, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it may have been Ferox's, it may have been Kane's, I can't remember. It doesn't matter anyway. Whereas if like and GigX would bring out a Munin fleet and like would reliably lose at least half of it, and sometimes more. And they weren't producing because we were on their turf. They couldn't mine, they couldn't build anything. Like we were killing off their production facilities. First thing we did was kill all their Asbels. So they're hitting Jita for their hulls. I've got hundreds of hulls, and the price is starting to tick up. I bought more Munins out on Jita. I eventually got the price on Munins to 7 times the build cost that I'd built them for. Stacked them all high, and just anyone who tried to undercut me, no. And reliably, CO2 would bring out a Munin fleet, we'd kick its ass, and GigX would hit Jita to buy them. And I'm reasonably certain that GigX was credit carding to pay the SRP bill for CO2. Because CO2, we know for a fact, CO2 were broke. So I'm reasonably certain that basically GigX was credit carding like ISK straight into my wallet for the entirety of that war. I made billions off that shit. Billions and billions of ISK. It was fantastic. And if the best thing was they retired the Munin doctrine, and we heard about it on the GS ISK channel on Jabba before Jita heard about it, and I dumped my entire stock. And like within like 3-4 hours, the price on Munins had like just gone through the floor. But I dumped my entire stock to buy orders before like most of Jita found out. And again, like you make money building them, you make money selling them. Occasionally, you make money SRPing them. Like I made so much ISK off that shit. So whoever that nameless Blackhand guy that only had like GigX taking out fleets, because GigX frankly is trash at FCing. Thank you, because you made me a fuck ton of money.
Well, especially now that he has no hands, right? Any more questions for us? I think our time's getting a little low, so type them or say them. Yeah, go ahead.
Aside from just outright paying for an account with real money, as I've been told people do, which why would you do that when Blazing exists? How do you sustain an account that's Blackhand in terms of like Plex? Do you just have to fucking be an IRAT and like the fucking dumb puppies, or is there any way to get around the whole ESI barrier of transferring money?
So there are ways. We like to do what they call black drops. So like either we can do it with you or you can do it yourself. But you basically put your 2 pilots in space next to each other and you drop through a cargo can and you can drop 500 plex. If you're going to do that though, we do recommend that you use the values that you can buy from CCP and then you put it in your plex vault. And then another way that we've been experimenting with recently is that ever since ESI came out, you can only see character data. So if you use like an alt or something, then you can just transfer it through the plex vault.
Interesting. What about like, because you could buy Plex, you could buy 38 Plex as a gift. Would that show up on ESI as well?
Yes.
I don't know. I'm being told to shut up.
Yeah,
Sorry for everybody, but I'm sitting here as a CI person. I'm like, stop telling them things.
That's fair. That's fair. I had interest in Blackhand a while back, and I still am interested. But as someone who makes all their money in Venal and doesn't pay for Eve because they make money in Venal.
So, I mean, the bottom line, kind of what Zork's getting at is we have a lot of ways for, we have a lot of experience when it comes to the ESI checks and stuff like that, and we have a lot of ways of making sure that people stay clean, a long history of making sure that our agents stay separated and stuff like that. So it's definitely something that once you're in the Blackhand, if there's a need, we will make sure that we can assist you to make sure that needs met. You don't necessarily have to be an IRAT. I mean, you still have to come up with good answers of where that came from. So you'll probably end up telling someone that you're just a wallet warrior. But we can make things like that work.
Okay.
Now, so technically, our Blackhand guys are out of time. We do have a gap right now in the schedule for the next half an hour, so we're just going to do some like Gooniversity open com Q&A stuff. I'm sure if the Blackhand guys want to stick around, they're welcome to do that some more. And then Ultra Gal is going to pick up in about half an hour with his section. But we do have just a little bit of open time right now, so if you guys want to stand up, stretch, bio, go grab a refill on your drink, anything like that, just open questions for what specifically, since Fuyun and I and Rat Knight, the three of us are all within the instructors group. Any questions you have on classes or anything that we've talked about, Apple's still here, Caitlin's still here, Zarek, I think you said you had to skip out, but any questions you guys have, just go ahead and do that. We'll keep comms pretty open here for the next half an hour or so.
I can hang around, Ranger. It's cool. I got nothing going on.
While waiting on a question, I do have I kind of had my own answer to something that was asked earlier that was kind of answered. And the question of how do you make friends with a group and then turn on them? I think that a lot of people have that fear of how do you get in there and how do you get close to a group of people and then end up having to disband their alliance, or how do you get how do you go from a place of trust in an organization to obviously feeling like you can disrupt their organization. And I would definitely say that as a Blackhand person, you don't have to necessarily worry about that because you go into it knowing exactly what it is. The entire time that you're in there, while you're definitely meeting these individual people and stuff like that, you can, they're not always as the individual person isn't always affected, and they're usually better at recovering than a corporation necessarily is. But part of it is you go in there knowing exactly what you're getting into, so you don't worry about that later, because the entire time that you're building up your persona or you're building yourself into these positions, you're also relaying information, and you're firmly cementing your role in the Blackhand as you do this stuff. So it never feels like you're going in there making friends and then suddenly throwing on the trench coat and letting out a maniacal laugh. I mean, there's no sudden turn like that. I mean, you know that this is a space job. You're doing something for the Alliance, and there's a lot of stuff that reminds you of what you're here to do. And honestly, if you go into it and you still feel that way after doing that, a lot of people would probably just not remove themselves from the program. But it's not something I ever see encountered, because people tend to understand what they're doing. Not only do they understand what they're doing, but they set goals. Like I have, I want to make sure to get here, and to get here, this is how I do it. Or I want to I want to support these groups. So I want to make sure that I'm, destroying every fleet that I can that's opposing these groups and stuff like that. So it's really hard to go native when you're Blackhand. You could, I guess. It's not something that I've necessarily seen, but I've never seen those. I've never seen someone pipe up in public, in the Blackhand public channel, that's going to have that necessarily moral dilemma, because they're people who want to, do their part. They're people who want to make an impact for the military in a certain area. So they tend to be very gung ho people, or people who want to do something, and they think that this is the way that they can do it. So they're it's very rare that I see that moral dilemma actually happen. And if it happens, where some people do get really, and they may be completely anti the alliance that they're spying on, but they have like the general line member in the corporations, that sometimes happens. And in those cases, people just don't disband that corporation, things like that. So I've I can understand where the fear comes from, but I haven't actually seen that happen.
And one of the great things you must not forget is that this is Eve, and you get to play a role in Eve that's not always your real personality completely. Like, it's not always. It's hard in Eve to get away completely from your own personality, but for the rest, you also get to role play or find out inside of yourself. That's pretty amazing. And one thing I did, like when I just started the game, I started the game with having some friends in there, etc. That I knew in real life. One of those friends was Sildra. He was in the Blackhand like long ago. And one of the things I did in the corp that I was in, they had a wormhole with a pass that was open to everybody, and I just stole everything out of that pass and just took it there. And they still don't know that I did it. Like, it's many years ago. I still sometimes talk to those people, to talk with them and have a funny chat, and they still don't know that I did that at that point, and they will never find out because I won't tell them. And I wasn't in that corp myself, but I still had access to the pass, or at least I wasn't in with many characters in that corp. So and those kind of things are just like, I wouldn't do that in real life, but it's just funny to see how people react to that and play that role. That's just fun to do.
I definitely concur with that. It's like, in general, I think, most people that meet me think I'm a fairly positive person, and I try to, I have a, fairly easygoing personality. I'm not someone who who's kicks over the Salvation Army, person and grabs the thing of money and runs away or anything like that. But being the bad guy can be fun, and in Eve, that's part of the draw to Eve is that there's things that you can't do elsewhere. You can't, the spying game and other games is just not, it's not the same. There's no reason for the spying game. There's no reason for the counterintelligence game, and a lot of other stuff. And I just like, sometimes in the bad in RPGs, I'll play the bad guy. It happens. But Eve's gives you a chance to experience things you wouldn't elsewhere, and it is kind of fun.
For you, why one day? Why not today?
I'm busy with other space jobs.
But how much work do you think this will take you to be a basic Blackhand person?
The biggest issue, honestly, is I would have to plex another account, and I'm pretty busy and don't really feel like playing for another account that I wouldn't actively use that much.
Do you have an account? Do you have an account that you need training now?
Yes, 3.
Well, see, at the same time, so Apple, I completely get where you're coming from, because it's not as much effort as a lot of people think, but I think that knowing your limits is a very good thing. You don't want to overcommit, and the Blackhand does actually have a commitment that you would have to adhere to. So if you are overloaded and you're already feeling that stress, it's understandable if you don't want to take on another role. So I actually applaud you for recognizing that before you sign up for enough stuff where you start to let down some of your other responsibilities because you can't spare the time everywhere you need to. That's a respectable opinion. I think that a lot of people can do the Blackhand that might not think they have enough time for it, but at the same time, it'd be better to if you're worried about your time, then maybe it is good to look at it and see whether you really have time to fit another SIG in there.
I mean, yeah, it's really something people really underestimate. I think how much work a patch job can actually be, especially multiple of them.
People don't realize how hard it is to start over either.
I don't underestimate that part. Believe me.
Yeah, I mean, okay, the guys doing the talks here really know how. I mean, you sort of got yourself into the position by somewhat force of others. I mean, yeah, I know how busy you are, Apple. Hell, I wouldn't dare to swap with you. I'd probably die.
I have a story about what Callan said about how you catch feelings for somebody. I caught feelings for somebody one time. It wasn't just somebody; it was a whole corp. It was during the GOTG war. I'm not gonna say the corp name, but they were in Slice, and they were the only newbie-friendly corp in that entire alliance. And they catch shit from the alliance level stuff all the time because they were the alliance leadership was convinced that if you recruited newbies, you were gonna have spies. And it's funny because we were using that corp as a way to get into Slice because they recruited newbies. It was fantastic. But the people were real nice, and eventually they got grounded down by the war. And long story short, at the end of the war, they ended up defecting and they went their own ways. So they left Slice, and I revealed myself to them as Zerk, as the Goon Swarm guy, right, the handler. And I talked to their CEO and a couple of their directors, and I offered them to come to Goon Swarm. And I had already, made the arrangements on our end that we were going to take this small corp who didn't really meet our requirements, but because I was going to be helping to vouch, and I was whatever. I made the arrangements to get them in. I gave them this offer on the silver platter, and they were like, "We don't want to play Eve on easy mode," and declined. And then they later went on to a wormhole and got destroyed by goons. Not on purpose, but it just happened that way.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
That's it. Well, that's the same corp that my story was about with the evictions.
Oh, okay, yeah, gotcha. Yeah, so it's just like, one time I did have that feeling, but then I got turned down, and there was just like a middle finger. I was like, okay, whatever. So, okay, that's cool.
How did they respond to you telling them, yeah, I'm a Blackhand person, I'm an agent in your organization? What was their...
Well, of course they didn't believe me at first, so I showed them logs and stuff. I actually burned my own spy because I was done with them anyways. So I burned myself on purpose.
Okay.
And I told them, and they just could not believe it, right? And maybe I did more damage there, but they were going away, and in my eyes, they were going to be non-strategic anymore. So, and I really felt that they were going to come here, so that's why I actually burned myself, because I truly believe that they were like the right people. They fit in well. I think that to this day those people would still fit in well in Goonswarm. They had the right mindset set and everything, and yeah, they're just like, fuck you.
See, and I actually was unaware that Zerk had done this, because this is the same corp, like he says, that they went off in a wormhole space. Well, I followed them to wormhole space, and so so when they were being evicted and all these goons showed up, and pretty much the after event that day of the eviction was, we can't get away from him in null sec space. We can't get away from him in wormhole space. Fuck this game. Would you guys like to go play something else? Now I know they did resurge after a while. They were dead for a while. So some of the people did come back and start to make it. But yeah, like we pounded that one into the ground. We followed them to the edge of space, of known space, and continued to kill them.
One thing I want to point out that was actually mentioned in Fleet, again, it's a statement, but it's really true, not to distract y'all from story time. But we've got GSF is ridiculously well organized, and seeing how all the other alliances work really illustrates this. If y'all have never been, whether it's with Insurgent Squad or Blackhand or from the group that you came to before you joined us, that statement is incredibly true. It's amazing the difference between not only our organization, but so much of what you guys can't see, the IT infrastructure that we have hinted at. Several people have talked about this, tools like for recon, for GSOL, GARPA, which I'm kicking myself I didn't reach out to GARPA to get an official spokesperson from them on. Anyways, all of this stuff that you guys can see, our IT infrastructure and the support to all of our SIGs, our squads, our directors is amazing. I have never encountered anything like it anywhere else in EVE, not to the crazy extent that we do.
Our alliance is better organized than the company I work for. And I do not work for a small company.
So we do have a couple of GARPA people around, but I'm not going to put them on the spot because I've already done that once today. So if they want to self-identify themselves and talk about it, they're welcome to do that. We do have Ultra coming in about 12 minutes to do his hunting piece. So,
well, I can say that from GARPA's point of view, it's I don't know. It's set up as it may sound a little silly considering that this is a space game, but it's set up as a research organization where people are free to pursue research interests that they have. We have resources in the other programmers and other database experts and data analysis people that are familiar with ESI and the structure of the game that can allow you to reach out and have ideas that interest you that you would like to pursue. And then of course the alliance benefits from these tasks that someone decides that they want to build an app that does X, then they've got the resources to reach out to get questions answered, like programming questions, database questions, and then maybe the alliance now has a new source of data or a new way to look at a certain kind of data that might be predictive, because we have such a large coalition. There's data scientists and there's a lot of data to go behind what we do, and so it's a place for the nerds to hang out and do their data scientist thing and do some predictive modeling, some assistive tools, things like that, and just a bunch of other things that you wouldn't expect to come from a space game. But it's honestly a good platform for people who like data. There's data available, and so there's a lot of people in that organization who essentially volunteered to let the alliance kind of capitalize on research that they're doing anyway, to possibly use it for alliance tools. And so it's kind of cool.
So for those of you guys who aren't aware of what GARPA does, probably the most front-facing thing is GTS. A lot of people call it GARPA, but really it's GTS. It's the navigation system, the external navigation, which of course there's the link. It's great. So it's a great program. I highly suggest y'all get it. It is still being updated. There's a GARPA guy working on it, fixing everything right now. Well, I should say fixing everything, but he's working on updates to it. But they've also done a lot of the research. For those of us who've been around a long time, they did some of the stuff on grid foo, which is not really a thing anymore, but it used to be with grid lines. And you could pull fleets across a grid line and you could break their logi and just smash the fleet to bits, or separate an FC and do all those kinds of things. We do have somebody maybe coming in. Everybody keep your eyes open. So you get all of these kinds of things that do. The GARPA is that piece. They did a recruiting thing for it. I think it was like 6 months ago now or something like that. What I hope you guys are seeing is that you should be looking on the recruitment forum thread. That's where a lot of these are getting posted. When GSOL does their recruitment, it's in there. GARPA did theirs, it was in there as I recall. The Skirmish Commander one is in there, all of those kinds of things. So just keep that in mind, that most of the groups we're talking about tonight will have a thread in there when they so desire to have it for something. A lot of them are put up constantly, but there are a few that go transiently through there.
So when you guys were talking about like the Blackhand and getting to experience what life is like in other alliances, like as compared to Goonswarm, I can completely second that, because where I first started my entire nullset career, like 3 years ago or something, I started out with Pandemic Horde, believe it or not, and the difference from coming from P-Horde 2.5 years ago as compared to where I am now, it's a gigantic difference. And trust me, when you dip your hand into these other alliances, like if you're wanting to do Insurgent Squad stuff, you're going to be hanging out with Horde, it's going to be a huge difference. Like seriously, like those of you who have only been in Goonswarm your entire life, you seriously will learn very much to appreciate it.
And it may sound silly, but we do have spies that come in from the cold sometimes. They will be working for another organization. They have a character that's in one of our corporations and realize that maybe they want to stay and they don't know how to approach that idea. And honestly, it's something that actually happens all the time. We have helped people come in from the cold quite often. So when spies do approach us, when they approach CI and say, I want to come clean and I've been spying for X organization, there's a lot of people like that in the alliance. You'd be surprised how many people dip their toe in the water by actually trying to spy on Goonswarm, and then they came clean, because obviously if you don't come clean, then we'll when we find out your history, things look bad. But they'll come clean and we'll be like, oh yeah, you were on our list, or you were not on our list, and we bring you in from the cold and help you actually acclimatize to not having to deal with your former corporation and stuff like that. So you'd be surprised how often people do decide that we're the place that they want to stay with.
Yeah, and as speaking from a recruiter's perspective for my corporation, I've actually met several people. I've met several people who said like they used to spy on Goonswarm in the past, and then they quit EVE and they come back and they're like, you know what? I want to do Goonswarm. It was a lot better.
And I think one of the things that helps Goons there, and a lot of people laugh about that, but one thing we do as Goons, as Imperium, is keep with our agreements. And I think that a lot of people are very surprised about that, but when that happens, they're like, okay, we made an agreement, they keep their agreement, that's open to the public, known to everybody, and that makes those things happening a lot better than people expect, and makes it easier for you to get people towards you.
There's a question in Fleet that It's a good one. I don't know the answer to that, so I'm not sure who you would really address to, Caitlin. I think that's going to go to you or to Zerg for GARPA stuff. Is there any way that anyone can get involved with tech support within our organization, to help out processing things? So Ziggy's got the actual question there, but that's basically the shorthand is, if you're interested in tech support, real live tech support for our infrastructure, who should we send you to?
Well, that's a difficult question. So we do have obviously we have a group of administrators, but I would say that the path to becoming one of the Goon Swarm tech nerds is long and arduous, because obviously there's a lot of trust involved with that, and so it doesn't tend to be something that's given out too lightly, and so the people that you see in there are like I know that it was pointed out, like a tier 1 help desk. We don't really have a tier 1 help desk. We have Anominate, Kilgarth, Bitey, Nimblar, and there's a lot of trust invested in those people, because they essentially have the keys to the kingdom when it comes to data and stuff. So it's not something that we approach really lightly, and we don't have a tier 1 organization as far as support. We just kind of expect corporations to assist their members and provide that support at a member level. So it's not something that the Alliance really has a tier 1 support. As far as GARPA is not really a user-facing organization. Like I said earlier, it's more research focused, where they have some products that they make available to the Alliance, and then besides making those products available to the Alliance, they also provide, or they also the Alliance makes use of whatever research they're already doing, but that's not really a support organization. That's more of an inward research organization. So I would say that just help your fellow line members out. There's no problem with that. But as far as going into an official position of being able to assist it, I would say that it's a long and hard road, and you'll probably know that you're a candidate for that long before you get there. And it's not something where you really volunteer for the position. You're kind of voluntold for the position.
As most directors are. Okay, so I know we've done a lot of Q&A stuff, but we're coming up on 100 hours, so Ultra Cal is going to take over now, talking about doing hunting and everything like that. So Caitlin, or Apple, you all are welcome to stick around, of course. Well, we're gonna switch gears from kind of our ITN, our going into the background stuff, the Blackhand things, the Insurgent Squad, to somebody who, for those of you who don't know, UltraCal is not a director of 1v1 PvP or something that doesn't really exist. But we brought him in to do, for those of you guys who don't know UltraCal, we brought him in to do a lot of the hunting things. He is somebody who's been around and doing this for years, was in deck when we lived back there. You'd see somebody pop up on Intel, and then you'd see UltraCal linking their lost mails. So he's been around, done this for many, many years. So is he going to teach us how to tackle? Maybe. So Ultra, with that intro, I don't really have anything to link for you. So whatever there's no recruiting thread for UltraCal fan club. But please take it away.
Thanks, Renji. Hey guys. So I'm normally not a guy that talks a whole lot on fleets. I'm more someone that does kind of stuff in the background, and usually I'm pretty quiet up until I tackle something, and then I shout on comms, "Yo, I'm over here, and I have an Ishtar tackled," or whatever, and then we go kill it. So it's pretty much the first time that I'm going to talk about this whole hunting thing, and I hope it's going to go okay. So I prepared a couple little memos here that I want to talk about. Just basically two big things I think that are important for being a hunter in Goon Swarm. And I'm going to keep it a little bit light and a little bit basic, so I'm not going to go into the whole like super nitty-gritty stuff. And I'm happy to keep it interactive as well. So if you guys have questions along the way, or you don't understand something, just write it in Fleet Chat or shout on comms, and I'll try and answer stuff if I can. So the two things I'm going to talk about today is, first of all, deciding on an area or a system to hunt, as well as having a way to get there. So that's the first part. And then the second part is going to be about the actual hunting. So using D-scan or combat probes, and then tackling something and actually holding tackle until the fleet gets there. So there's quite a couple of tools that you can use when you are deciding on an area or a system to hunt. So usually you want to go for an area that has either raiders or miners with a lot of activity, and ideally a couple of systems with activity, so you have a good chance of finding something. And one of the best tools to use for finding an area or systems for this is .lan. So I'm going to link a link into Fleet Chat real quick. So if you guys open that page, that's just one of the regions in Eve. You can see a couple systems that show up in like red and orange colors, and basically that's showing how many NPCs have been killed in that system in the last hour. So that gives you an indication of like how many people are raiding there, or what kind of ships are raiding there, and that there's some kind of activity there. So probably if you're going to take a fleet out there, you're likely to find like raiders that are doing something there. So that's one of the ways. Another way that you can check for miners mostly is using the in-game map. So in Eve, we have this thing that's called ADM, or an activity defense multiplier, and that basically uses the amount of ratting and the amount of mining that's done in the system, and it calculates a kind of a number out of that. So if there's a lot of mining being done in the system, that index will go up, and that indicates that there's been a lot of mining there. So just to give you a quick example, if you click on the top left of your screen, so where it says T5ZI-S, it will open the information for the system that we're currently in. And then there's a couple tabs. So if you go to the tab all the way to the right where it says sovereignty, here you can see that information that I was talking about. So here you can see the activity defense multiplier, and then you can see military index and industry index. So in T5Z, the industry index is 0, so there's absolutely no mining being done here whatsoever. So you can basically just look at the amount of NPC kills, and you can find raiders here, but you're not very likely to find miners here. But for other systems, you can see this industry index, and if the industry index is, let's say 5.0, so all the way at the max, then it's very likely that there are miners here at some point during the day. And you can also see for the military index for this system that there's a little red arrow that points down. That means that the military index is going down at the moment, which means there's probably no one raiding at this time. And if it's a green arrow that points up, that means that someone is currently raiding there. If it's for industry index, it will be mining, which is a great indication of seeing if there's someone here or not. Does that make sense to everyone, or are there any questions already? Otherwise, I'm going to move on.
I would say just keep going, UltraCal.
All right. So those are basically the two big points for deciding on an area or a system to hunt or to find like activity in space. Then there's a couple ways of getting there. So I think previously someone talked a little bit about drifter wormholes. I think some of you already know what these are, but these are basically wormholes that spawn all over New Eden, and recently they've been kind of buffed. So there's a large amount of wormholes these days. And the systems that they can spawn in are predetermined. So it's all the systems that have a Jove observatory. I just linked another map in Fleet. So this is for Delve. Let's see if I can actually open this. So all of the systems that have this kind of thick black line around the system, that's where these drifter holes can spawn. So they can't spawn in any other systems. So if you kind of use the jump bridges in Delve smartly, and you go through these, I think it's, what is it, 10 or something? Like you go through these 10 systems using the jump bridges, and you check all of them, then you're bound to find at least like 2 or 3 drifter wormholes that you can enter, and then you can scan down all the other wormholes that are inside the drifter wormhole, and this gives you a really easy way of getting access to many different regions in EVE. So if you spend, let's say, an hour, you spend like 20 minutes going through all these systems, and then maybe 30 minutes scanning inside one of these drifter wormholes. Usually you end up with like 10 or 15 different wormholes that go all over New Eden. And if you do a little bit of that kind of prep work before you go on a fleet, your FC is going to be very happy, and you're very likely to find a lot of targets to hunt. Then another way that's even easier is using Thera. So Thera is also one of these special wormholes. And there's a website called Eve Scout, where a couple of people that kind of assist on this website, they help scan down the wormholes and they post them on this website. So if you're hoping to hunt some system, let's say Outer Passage, the one that we linked before, you can always check Eve Scout and quickly see if there's a wormhole that goes to Outer Passage or one of the regions close to Outer Passage. And you can also check if there's something close to Delve, or even Fountain or Aquarius or Cloud Ring, because we have all these jump bridges that we can use. And usually you can find a wormhole to take you where you want to go. Yeah, about the drifter wormhole. So there are 5 different drifter wormholes. So we have, they have names. So you have Vidette, Redoubt, Sentinel, Barbican, and Conflux. Those are the 5 drifter wormholes. And I think inside each of those drifter wormholes is about 40 or 50 wormholes that almost all go to nullsec. And they take a bit of time to scan down once you're inside of those, and they're very big systems. So sometimes you have to warp like 200 AU to get to a different wormhole. But they're a great kind of like highway to move around all of New Eden. It just takes a little bit of prep work to scan some stuff. And another interesting thing about drifter wormholes is that they always have the same size. Like the wormhole is always the same size, which is 750,000 tons. Which means that, for example, a cruiser ship is about 10,000 tons. So if you go only one way, you can take about 60, 65 cruisers through one of these drifter wormholes. But if you take frigates, you can take pretty much a full fleet, like 250 people back and forth. So those are 2 easy things. Another way you can do is just scanning wormholes yourself. So we have this Pathfinder SIG that I think Kathy already talked a little bit about earlier. There's a lot of people in that SIG that just enjoy scanning wormholes and enjoy the kind of exploration part of that. They log all these wormholes into a website, which is pathfinder.goonfleet.com. You can also look at that to see what kind of connections there are around Delve, because usually people like start scanning from Delve and surrounding regions. And that's a great way to find wormhole directions as well into all different kinds of areas. And then lastly, that's just a recent thing, which I think lasts for like 2 weeks or something, which are these Christmas filaments. Basically, they teleport your fleet of I think 20 or 25 people into a random nullstack region. So you can't really direct like where you want to go, but if you use a couple of them, I think you can jump around a couple times. And that's also a great way to just get away from Delve and our whole kind of blue donut thing, and get to some enemy space and start hunting around there. One of the nice things for these things compared to wormholes is that they don't have a limit in size. So, I mean, they have a limit in amount of ships, but you could actually take 25 battleships using a filament, which you can't do through a drifter wormhole, for example. All right, that was all I have for deciding on an area and how to get there. So from now, I'm going to talk a little bit about actual hunting, unless there are any questions about what I've talked about so far. All right, well, if anyone still comes up with a question, just interrupt me and ask. You can ask at the end as well. So I'm going to go into the actual hunting bit for when you're on a fleet. So here I think that there are three things that are important to keep in mind. The first one is that you surprise your enemy. The second one is locating the ship, so basically scanning it down using either D-scan or combat probes and then tackling it. And the last one would be staying alive until the fleet gets there. So about surprising the enemy. This is one of the more simple things, I guess. I think the biggest thing that's important here is that you keep some distance from the fleet itself. So let's say you have a 40-man fleet of harpies, and you are the hunter for this fleet. Then just like we do, enemies also use intel, and they use intel chats and intel tools like near2 or whatever. And usually these intel channels and intel tools, they track the fleets that are moving through their space. So they'll say there's 40 harpies in 1DQ, and if you are ratting in T5Z, you're going to duck up and you're going to warp out and get yourself safe. So the idea is that you keep, let's say, 2 or 3 jumps ahead or away from the kind of blob, like away from your fleet, so that even if they are tracking your fleet, that you are kind of off the radar and you can still surprise raiders and miners by suddenly showing up somewhere where they don't really expect you to be just yet. But of course, you need to kind of stay somewhat near to your fleet as well, because if you tackle something, you need to stay alive long enough for the fleet to get to you and to kill the thing before you actually die to whatever it is you have tackled. So you need to communicate a little bit with your FC and other hunters so that the FC knows like where you're going, so that he knows where to wait or where to head towards. And same goes for other hunters, so that you don't like send people off in the other direction, or that they burn off on themselves. Yeah, that's basically about surprising the enemy. Then second point would be locating a ship and tackling it. So there's a couple ways you can locate a ship when you enter a system. And the first part is the easiest.
Oh, Saber guy, get him. Ah, he made it through.
He made it to get it.
I'm going into the other side.
Same.
Yeah, try and get him.
All right, if you guys manage to nab him, let us know.
No.
He's clear.
He warped out.
Oh, okay.
All right.
All right, Ultra, please come back. Go ahead.
All right, I'll continue. So the first way of locating a ship and tackling it, which is the easiest way of doing it, is basically having a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of luck. So for ratting ships, there's a couple different sites that people run. So also in, for example, T5Z, you can see that there's blood havens, blood hubs, blood ports. And if you have a little bit of knowledge about, oh, there's a fleet somewhere. So if you have a little bit of knowledge about which ships run which kind of sites, So, for example, havens and sanctums are usually ran by, for example, carriers. And then if you just warp to one of the havens, and there's, let's say, 3 havens in the system, then you have a 1 out of 3 chance that you're going to land on something, and then you can just tackle it. And you can actually find ships like that quite reliably, with just a little bit of knowledge about the different kind of sites and what kind of ships run those sites, and then a little bit of luck of just landing on the right site at the right time. So one of the things you can use to kind of predict what site something will be in is, for example, if you look at .lan and it says that T5Z has 1,000 NPC kills in the last hour, which is a decent amount. Then when you enter the system, there's only 2 people in local. So what this tells you is that there's probably one guy running either a carrier or a super carrier that's ratting a lot just on his own, which would mean that there's probably someone in the havens or in the sanctums. And on the other hand, if there's, for example, almost no NPC kills in a system, like it's like 50 or 30 or maybe 0 even, and there's 30 guys in local, that can tell you that it's either like a staging system for one of the coalitions, or that there's a fleet there, or that there's like a mining fleet going on. So this kind of combination of information, like NPC kills and how many people are in local, what's on D-scan, what kind of anomalies they have in that system, all that information kind of plays into where you should be warping and where you should be checking for ships. All right, so the second one is D-scan. So this is one that takes a little bit of practice to become like fast at it or to become quick at it. But the theory is kind of simple. So D-scan is a directional scanner. It allows you to set a range and an angle or an amount of degrees that you want to scan in. And I think the kind of standard accepted way of scanning something down is that you start scanning in 360 degrees at maximum range, which is like 14 point something AU. And let's say you see an Ishtar on scan within that, then you jump from 14 AU scan to a 10 AU scan. And if the Ishtar then disappears, you know he's between 14 AU and 10 AU. And then you can narrow it down. So you can scan, for example, at 12 AU. And if you see him again, then you know he's between 10 and 12. And that's how you kind of figure out how far away that ship is. And once you know the kind of range that they're in, usually what I do is I switch to a 5-degree angle, and then you can use a trick that's the V-click trick. So there's a shortcut button for D-scanning, which by default is V. So if you hold the V button and you click on something, so either click on something on your overview or click on one of the anomalies in the probe scanner window, then it will actually D-scan at 5 degrees in that specific direction. And that's a way how you can check if a ship is in a certain site. So I think there's a question. Let me check it real quick. Is it okay to use Pirate Little Helper for comparing D-scan with anomalies? I don't know. I actually don't know what Pirate Little Helper is, so.
Yeah, that's a new one to me as well. I've never heard of that one.
It's an old tool. I don't know who actually runs it though, so it's probably not us, and therefore you don't know where the intel's going.
Generally, the rule, just as Zega just said, is if we don't know who controls it, you shouldn't use it because it could be feeding intel to anybody. Our A- is controlled by us, so my answer is no, because I don't know who that feeds to. But I don't know who that goes to. So when that's the case, my answer is always no.
Yeah, I'm also not sure if it's a good idea to use that tool, but it is basically what you're doing. So it is comparing the things you can see using Bscan and the things you can see in your probe scanner, so the list of anomalies. And yeah, the faster you can do that, the more, like, the higher chance you have of actually catching something. So if you can do that in like 20 seconds, you have a good chance that they were like kind of asleep for 10 seconds and are still aligning out or something like that. And actually, yeah, I learned most of that just doing hunting in whelp squad fleets. Like, we used to do those daily fleets where we hunted with like 2 or 3 guys. And just by doing that a lot, I kind of became faster and better at it. But one of the ways, if you want to like try it out or kind of train yourself a little bit, actually Delve is a great place to kind of try descanning stuff, because there's a lot of things mining and ratting all the time in every system. So if you just set a destination from for example 1DQ to OnceMap or to Sucked, and you jump to the next system, and then you use Dscan, and you try and find that Rorqual you see on Dscan, figure out where he is, you warp to him, and then you go to the next system, and you do the same thing again. I don't think it takes much time to become good at it. It's just, yeah, after you do it a couple times, you get into the groove, and then it becomes quite easy. All right, so that's about Bscan. If you guys have any questions about that, we can talk about that afterwards. I'm going to go on to the third one, which is combat probes. I think a lot of you have done some exploration, and probably you've scanned down some wormholes and things like that. And combat probes work pretty much the same way, except they also work on ships and on structures. And for hunting, this works especially well for bigger ships. So if you're combat probing, for example, a carrier or a super carrier, or even battleships, they're okay for, like rattlesnakes and stuff like that. They're much bigger and they're a lot easier to scan down than smaller ships, like an Ishtar or a VNI, for example. So usually these combat probes are fitted to, for example, interdictors, like a saber or a flycatcher. You use it to scan down a super really quickly, which you can often do in 1 or 2 scans. And then you can warp at exactly 0 right on top of them. So even if they're 200 kilometers off of the anomaly, like if they've burned out a lot because they were aligned to the Keepstar, once you scan them down, you can warp directly on top of them, and you can bubble them, and you can kill them. And that's a great way of doing that for like bigger ships. So those are the main ways of locating a ship and tackling it. And then the last part that's important for hunting is actually staying alive until the fleet can get to you. So once you've tackled a carrier and you're 2 or 3 jumps away from your fleet, then you need to stay alive for a little bit and keep it tackled so that your fleet can get there, they can get bubbles and other points on the guy, and that you can actually kill him. And I think this is where a lot of the newer guys kind of end up messing up, because they kind of, you know, learn how to descan or use combat probes, and they tackle something, and then within the first 10 seconds they die to the ship, and the fleet can never get there in time. Yeah, it's a good question about using descan before you use combat probes. So yeah, it's difficult to explain in like 2 minutes, but there's a lot of different situations that can happen. So if you jump into a small system where you can see the entire system on Dscan, then it's also very easy to combat probe something down. So if you jump into a system that's 10 AU in total, then you see 2 carriers on Dscan. Then if you have combat probes, I would immediately put them out, scan at the sun at like 8 AU, and then you're going to have probably 100% scan on a carrier, and you can warp directly to them. It becomes more difficult when you go into a very big system. So if you go into a 200 AU system, then descanning becomes very difficult, and combat probing becomes, I think, easier, because you can combat probe a very large area. And again, that would work well for bigger ships, but yeah, not very well for VNIs and stuff like that. So usually when I hunt, I fly an interceptor, and on interceptors it's very difficult to fit combat probes. Like you would have to give up a lot of your tanking and speed tanking ability to fit combat probes, and that doesn't make it, I think that makes it not worth it, or at least that's my opinion. I think if you fly an interdictor, they're a little bit easier to fit. And for that, it makes more sense, I think. I can link a couple fits at the end if you guys want. Right, I'm going to go on to staying alive. So one of the easiest things to kind of start with this is learning what kind of bonuses all of the ships have. So let's say you tackle, for example, an Ishtar. If you want to prevent yourself from dying to the Ishtar, it's very helpful to know what kind of ship or what kind of qualities the Ishtar has that he can kill you with. So an Ishtar, for example, is a drone ship, which has bonuses to, I think, drone damage and drone tracking. So that Ishtar is going to try and send drones after you, and basically your job will be to survive his drones. That's the kind of simplest way to put it. Then you can go a little bit further and look at like the types of drones. So for example, if you're flying an interceptor, you should go at least like 4,000 kilometers or 4,000 meters. What is it? Kilometers or meters per second? And you can look at meters, yeah. And you can look at the different types of drones and see how fast those drones go without any like buffs. So for example, in Interceptor, you're going to be faster than all of the heavy and all of the medium drones, and you're going to be faster than 2 of the light drones. So Hornets and Hobgoblins are kind of the slower ones for the light drones, and Acolytes and Warriors are the faster drones. So the Acolytes and Warriors are the 2 that you should be most worried about. And then those 2 drones do specific types of damage. So Acolytes do EM damage, Warriors do explosive damage. So if you're an interceptor and you can tank against EM and against explosive damage, you have a very good chance of surviving against an Ishtar, for example. So you can do a lot of this kind of theory crafting and yeah, it's just a little bit of knowledge. So if you know a little bit about the ship that you have tackled, like if you have a Cerberus tackled or an Ishtar or a VNI or a carrier, then the way that you survive against that ship is usually based on what type of bonuses that ship has or what kind of qualities that ship has, and it's good to know those kind of things. Yeah, so that's the first thing. So look at the bonuses that each ship has. Then another way that people die is if you get within scram range or within newt range. So especially in an interceptor, if you get scrammed, you can't use your micro warp drive anymore, so you lose a lot of your speed, you become slow. Sometimes you can get neutered out even within that range, and then you die very quickly to, for example, drones. So even heavy drones will be able to catch up with you. Guns will be able to track you, like missiles will land perfectly on you. So that's something you need to be aware of. So it's usually good to stay out of scram range, out of neuting range. And keep your speed up, so be as fast as you can.
For those of you who aren't aware right off the top of your head, scram range that he's talking about, you know, it does vary a little bit, but we're talking 8-9 kilometers is scram range. So if you can stay out of that piece, that's what he's talking about. There are exceptions to that, but that's basically where we are.
Yep. So yeah, I noticed that we're almost at 30 minutes already, and I've only been talking the whole time. So yeah, I think that's mostly it. I think the last thing would be just having a bit of experience. Like, there's a lot of SIGs within Goon Swarm that take newer people, like Whelp Squad is one of those, but yeah, I think almost all of our peacetime fleets, they're very happy if you like want to give hunting a try or want to give just scouting a try even. And I think the best way to learn is to just go out and try and do it, like ask questions to people that are doing it. actively or that have done it before, just try it, give it your best shot and learn from your mistakes. Like, that's the way I learned. I started out in Whelp Squad. I think the first couple things I tackled, I just died immediately and was just like so excited that I pointed something that I didn't think about anything else. But yeah, after a while you get better at it.
That's a good question. The answer is sort of. With it, when you turn on the micro warp drive, you will get the signature bloom instantly, but your velocity doesn't. And then depending on how you're orbiting, right, your rotation piece, there is a little bit of inertia that you've got to work on. So pulsing it is okay, but the instant you turn on that micro warp drive, your signature blooms. It doesn't ramp up like your speed does. It's an instantaneous thing.
Yeah, I think that's a very situational thing. So if you're running away from drones or from fighters, for example, from a carrier's fighters, you would never turn your micro warp drive off just because you want to like be faster than them. That's the only way you're gonna avoid their damage, pretty much. But if you're avoiding not autocannons, what are the other ones? Not autocannons, but the longer range ones. Artillery, yeah. So if you're avoiding artillery guns, you could turn your prop mod on for a second just to get, for example, into closer range on the ship, so that you can get under their guns, and then you turn it off again so that you have a very low signature radius. Yeah, I don't know if you would pulse it in between. I don't know if that makes sense. I think that hurts you as much as it will help you in the end.
Yeah, I would agree. I would do what Ultracal was saying. I would run it until I got under the guns and then turn it off to lower my sig radius. Once you get under a battleship's guns, if you can get in, somebody that don't have smart bombs and just blast you. The only real threat is from drones at that point, because battleship guns, they're not going to be able to hit you. Yeah, newts a little bit. That is a thing, but.
Yeah, I think it's once you're under someone's guns, you don't need to use your micro warp drive anymore. So even if you get nuded, you're pretty much okay, as long as you can keep point or scram on the guy. Then.
So grapplers and stasis weapon fires, these are the same things. They're just for different hulls. Are designed to just slow you down. The thing that you guys got to remember is when you're dealing with the ship that's got webs or something like that, as terrible as this sounds, you as tackle on a fleet is a little different than what Ultracal's talking about, but as a fleet, all you need to do is hold that guy just long enough for the interdictors and the Hictors or whatever to land and just pound the shit out of him. When you're solo PvPing, that's a different kind of thing. Small gang stuff is a little different. My opinion, the grapplers and webs are more important. Small gang stuff rather than the big fleets, because you only need to hold that guy just long enough for the alphas to get him. We're a little bit over time in the next person's section, but since that person is me, I don't care all that much. Do we have any other questions for Ultracal before we'll move on to the next section here? Yes, hero tackle for the swarm. Yes. Hero tackle is a thing. I don't honestly know who the very first person was for it, but we've had newbies, day old newbies, go out and grab enemy FCs and just ruin their day. This is where the Rifter meme comes from. That is an actual thing that happened. Has happened. Will happen again. Yes, will happen again.
Happens pretty much daily.
True, you do have to hold them long enough for a secondary point to arrive. But one thing that you can do is not necessarily against a FC and you hold them down, but if you can just disrupt their micro warp drive and they don't realize you've done it, you can really misposition that fleet and they can just get pounded. Logi anchors are another great one. Go out and grab a Logi anchor, especially if they're using cap transfers, so Bazzies, Guardians, things like that, Ospreys as well. And you can pull them away and disrupt their cap chains. And again, for any Logi pilot, they know the nightmare of a disrupted cap chain. You can smash an entire Logi wing quite easily by pulling one guy out of a cap chain. Hades, I have no idea the answer to that. I would not spam it like every day, because if you piss off Kathy, you're not getting in there. But I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think they make you. Yeah, you're with images, right? Like normally they make you draw like a paint image for what wormholes mean to you. Post it in the forum thread, and then you can get it.
Yeah, if you haven't done that MS Paint thing, Kathy's kind of a freak about that. Yes, with paint image. I don't know then, man. I have no idea.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I had for you guys. Yeah, if anyone is kind of getting into hunting and you run into like a more specific question or something you can't figure out, you're always welcome to PM me on Jabber or send me a forum mail. I usually don't answer questions like, can you teach me hunting from zero, because I don't have time to like teach everyone. But if you're already kind of, you know, researching the stuff yourself and you're trying to kind of get into it and you have a specific question, then I'm very happy to discuss things. Also, if you need help with like fits or anything like that, feel free to contact me.
I'm going to do a shameless plug right off of that. Fuyun's been saying this in Fleet a couple of times. Nice segue from Ultra. I didn't even know he was doing this. We do have our 102 and 103 classes. These are classes that deal with everything that Ultra just told you about: descanning, tackling, combat probing. We run those so you come out and get the basics to then have a more specific question. So we will take the teaching you from scratch so that UltraCal doesn't have to, and you can give him a specific question. So look for those on the forum op calendar when we schedule those. Again, we're not going to do anything until after the first of the year, because I gave all my instructors a couple of weeks off, except for today. The lazy bastards are here helping out.
Yeah, we are slackers, aren't we?
Well, thank you all for coming out. We do have Isabel's going to be coming in about 20 minutes to do Black Ops. I'm going to do a thing about Reavers here. Just one sec. So I'm going to do that. I think, and I like this with Isabel coming in right after I do the Reavers thing. I think you're going to find a lot of overlap between the Reavers group and Black Ops. Black Ops is deployed out right now. I'll leave that up to Isabel to tell you all about that. And the big thing for what Reavers do is kind of a behind the scenes thing. We are not a overt action kind of a group. Our role is to create chaos. When we were originally constructed or originally created, this was a group that used wormholes, went behind enemy lines. We were tower siegers, so we would hit pauses or sticks or towers, however you want to call them. It was before citadels were created. And our goal was just to create chaos. Because at the time, this was when the fatigue system was just put in. And for those of you who have just joined the game in the last year or so, fatigue is different now than it was at that point in time. I usually like to ask this question. I know at least a couple of y'all know the answer, but in Fleet, does anybody know when fatigue was first introduced, what the limit on your fatigue timer was? Anybody know what that number was?
30 days, I think.
It wasn't actually 30 days. Goombomb is right. There was no limit when it was first put in. And there was somebody who ended up with like a year of fatigue. So it was just crazy. And I missed who said 30 days. That was introduced not that long after it. Because CCP realized quite quickly that was stupid. It's down to, I believe it's 5 hours now. But at the time, the idea was We would jump behind enemy lines when the enemy had deployed, and they then had to decide, okay, are we going to continue shooting the goons that are in the main fleets or wherever they had deployed, or do we need to come back and protect our ratters? So one of the things I want you guys to keep in mind is we don't deploy the Imperium complete strength, all that often. It's been almost 6 months since we were really deployed. When we came back from the last Northern War was, I think it was August, so 4 months. But our ratters continue out here. Our miners are still going in Delve. The Theta guys are still around. The Karma Fleet standing fleets are still around doing things. They may be less active, but they're still around. A lot of the other groups don't do that. When they deploy their combat strength, their ratters are left. And what Reavers did was jump behind lines to create chaos, to force them to pull their heavy ships back off the front line. So that's what Reavers was originally created to do. We've done a lot of things in other areas. The story that I told the fleet earlier, this was when Apple was doing his piece on Insurgent Squad, was about going through and really mistreating a horde that was actually a Reavers fleet that was doing that. We jumped in just to screw with them. We were in C4C was their staging system at the time, as I recall. Reavers, oh, and I forgot to link the thing. Let me do that. I'm terrible. There's our recruiting thread. The big thing for, as several of the other groups have in there, is, you've got to be in the Alliance, in a member corps. It doesn't have to be GSF. Could be in LON, could be in Bastion. We have people from all of the Imperium alliances. Vouch is a thing, and you just got to have time so that we can see what you're doing. We do run background checks on people. That's actually one of my roles in Reavers. It's one of the things that I do is I go through, and I'm known as the gatekeeper. So that's one of the things that we do. What you'll find that's interesting as well, there's a whole lot of Reavers people out on main fleets, and there's a really easy way to identify us, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. You just have to figure it out. But there is a very clear way to identify us. Well, that's it. I'm just going to call you, and I like that. Enigma, I like that. CSA, this is from back in the day, where to build capitals, really build super capitals, you had to use a CSAA. This is an old pause structure. They don't really exist anymore. All of that stuff has been taken over by the Keepstars and Satoyos and all of the new Citadels. Are we the ones constantly lemming through the gate? Yeah, maybe. I can neither confirm nor deny that. We do. Honestly, we don't have all that many lemmings in Reavers. There's not too many, because if you piss off Asher, he'll just let me purge you. And I do enjoy doing that. I'm kind of a crazy sadist about that, but hitting that purge button is kind of fun to do.
Press the red button.
Yeah, it is the red button. The voucher. So anybody can do a vouch who is a member of Reavers. There's just a thread that you have to post in for it. Basically, the way the vouch works is if you were to vouch somebody in, let me give you a for instance. So if I was to vouch Fuyon in, and then Fuyon gets purged for being a useless scrub who just like fucks everything up and everybody hates him, then I would probably be purged too, because it's my fault that he was there. Now that won't be the case because I don't like Fuyon, so I won't vouch it. But that's the sequence in theory. Well, I thought for sure I'd get him riled up on that one. The final thing to keep in mind for Reavers is that it is a USTZ SIG. So you'll see a lot of them operate in different time zone. Reavers is USTZ only. There's a slight overlap to AU and a little bit to EU, but it is effectively a USTZ only group. For you guys who did not click on the gift that Isabella put in there, that is the classic one. It's pretty accurate for our fleets. Honestly, Reaver is not that bad. I don't think Isabella would say that Black Ops is that bad either, but main fleet is definitely that bad. That's pretty much it. There's not too much to talk about more. There's no real skill requirements for it. We've got doctrines that go from really high level stuff to basic organization of, okay, you can fly a Rifter, so we can get you into that. It's one of the, we refer to it as the no pores SIG, because Asher is famous for the number of shit he puts into the cargo holds of the Fitz, which is just incredible, the amount of crap he makes us carry around. But also for his tendency to change doctrines on a whim, and we all have to buy new stuff. So it is definitely not a SIG for pores. You'll run out of money real quick if you don't have a good money stream already. Okay, so Isabella's aspiration versus goals. I like that aspirational goal versus reality. I guess that's always a thing. You always have a lemming around. The biggest one for Black Ops, because I have seen Isabella bitch about this so much, along with the other leaders of Black Ops, is people who don't read the pings and bring the wrong kind of ship. And specifically, I'm talking about the T3 cruisers on the gate camps. And that's reading pings, guys, is something you should always actually read, you know. In main fleets, you get a little more leeway on it. In the SIGs, if you annoy the FCs with those kind of questions, eventually they'll just kick you out because they hate you. That's pretty much it for what we've got. Do you guys have any questions on that? We're a fairly quiet group. Oh, this is a really good one that pisses the enemy off to no end. Reavers has a no talking in local policy. So when we're on our fleet, we don't say anything in local. And the enemy, that just drives the enemy crazy. They will see us moving through a dozen systems and we never say anything, and it just drives them nuts. They absolutely hate that. They don't understand why we won't talk to them. Still talk to your food. I like that. That's a good one. So, do you guys have any questions on anything we've kind of talked about? Any questions on Reavers or anything that we do? We don't usually advertise too much. That's a good question. So, activity requirements, when we deploy, it is required that you are deployed with the SIG. You don't have to deploy every single one of your alts, of course, but we do require that at least one alt is deployed. The system, when it comes down to at the end of every deployment, what we do is Asher and I sit down with a list of every scrub that's in there that I think should be kicked in the ass out the door. And we go through it, the two of us, and we come up with a list of people who actually deserve to be purged, and then I go hit the red button. So it's not an actual number thing, because we refuse to set a minimum standard for people who don't have the motivation to be with us. So I'm not going to tell you the number is 5 because it's not. Asher and I decide at the end of every deployment who we think should be purged for not doing his stuff. How do we interact with other groups? Probably the closest group we interact with would be Black Ops. There's a lot of overlap between Reavers and Black Ops. There's also a lot of overlap with Liberty. Merit thing, sure. I suppose you could put it that way. I'm not sure I would have done it, but yeah, you do a merit thing. If you're out active on the fleets, that's what matters. Oh, look at that. Tony being late and wants a pap. You scrub.
Tony. Goddamn.
Any other questions on that one? Well, not about the pap thing, but local. Tony's not even in fleet. Oh man. Sorry, comms. He's not on comm.
I mean, I just. You know, Tony sometimes is so full of himself. You just gotta love it.
Yeah, Tony. Okay, so we're gonna kick out. Let me see. Isabella's here. I don't have too much more to add. Isabella, do you want to kick off a little early for your section?
Sure.
Okay, why don't you hop up here? I'm going to reset the recording for everybody, and we'll do one more ping to see if we can refresh our numbers because it's getting a little bit late. So now that I just said that to Isabella, why don't we take like a 2-minute break, guys? If you want to do a bio, get a refill, we'll have Isabella pick up here. What time is it? Like 00:55 or something like that.
Can you drag me, please? I don't have permission to get in command. Thank you.
That's weird. How do you not have permission to be in Bravo command?
Local probably not set the key for Mumble. If Isabella, are you in skirmish commands?
Yeah, but I don't ever really go to command channels.
Local. I'm using local. You should do too because that's sort of OPSEC, I guess. I assume. I don't know. There is a forums post in the welcoming thread. I think it is in skirmish commands. There is a key you can copy